The rain hit Tokyo like static on a broken television screen, and in the middle of it, gunfire cracked through Shibuya's back alleys. 3 men in dark suits sprinted between dumpsters, blood soaking through one man's shoulder, while sirens screamed somewhere in the distance. At the front of them, calm as still water despite the chaos around him, walked a tall man in a charcoal coat, his eyes cold, his voice colder. "Get him to the car," Ren Takahashi said, not even raising his volume, "and find out who gave the order to attack my men in daylight." This was the world nobody knew existed behind Tokyo's glowing skyline, a world of loyalty, blood, and silence. And in a few days, a woman who sold nothing but kindness would walk straight into the center of it, without even knowing his name. Before we go further, if you love stories about hidden identities, powerful men, and love that defies every rule, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Trust me, you don't want to miss where this story goes. 3 days earlier, the city was calm. Laura Johnson walked out of Meguro Language Academy just after 6 in the evening, her tote bag slung over one shoulder, her feet aching from standing all day correcting the pronunciation of eager Japanese students. She was 26, sharp-eyed, kind, and endlessly practical. She had come to Tokyo 2 years ago with a suitcase, a sketchbook full of fashion designs, and a stubborn belief that she could build something of her own from nothing. She wasn't rich. She wasn't trying to be. Every yen she earned went into a small savings account she refused to touch, no matter how tempting late-night ramen runs or designer fabric sales became. It was for her dream, a small clothing line, handmade, honest, hers. She was walking past Meguro General Hospital when she heard it, a voice, frail but firm, arguing in broken, panicked Japanese with a nurse at the front desk. "Please," the elderly woman said, clutching the counter. "Please, I just need a little time. My grandson, I don't want to call him, please." The nurse looked apologetic but firm. "Ma'am, without payment, we cannot proceed with the procedure. I'm sorry." People passed by without stopping. A businessman glanced over, sighed, and kept walking. A young couple whispered to each other and looked away. Nobody moved to help. Laura stopped. She didn't know this woman. She didn't understand every word being said, but she understood fear. She understood dignity being stripped away in public, one apology at a time. She stepped forward. "How much does she need?" Laura asked the nurse in careful Japanese. The nurse blinked, surprised. "I'm sorry, are you family?" "No," Laura said, "but how much?" The number the nurse gave her made Laura's stomach drop. It was almost everything she had saved, 2 years of tips, extra tutoring sessions, skipped vacations, all of it, gone in an instant if she paid it. It was her rent money, too. If she paid this, she would have to explain to her landlord why she was late again for the 3rd time this year. She thought of her fashion sketches, sitting in a drawer, waiting. Then she looked at the elderly woman's trembling hands, at the fear behind her eyes, and she thought of her own grandmother back home in Georgia, and how she'd want someone, anyone, to help her if she were ever this afraid, this alone. "I'll pay it," Laura said quietly. The old woman turned sharply. No, you don't have to." "I want to," Laura said, smiling gently. She handed her card to the nurse before she could talk herself out of it. When the transaction went through, the old woman grabbed Laura's hand, her eyes glassy with tears. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Laura crouched slightly so she was eye level with her, because nobody should have to beg to stay alive. "What is your name, child? Please, I need to know." Laura hesitated, then smiled. "Just promise me you'll get well." And with that, she turned and walked into the rain-streaked Tokyo evening, disappearing into the crowd before the old woman could stop her. That old woman was Haruko Takahashi, and the empire that would soon turn itself upside down looking for her mysterious savior belonged to her grandson. If this story already has your heart racing, smash that like button. It helps more people discover this story, and trust me, this is only the beginning. Ren received the call from his grandmother's caretaker at 11 that night. He was in his penthouse office overlooking the city, reviewing reports on rival territory encroachments, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable as always. When his phone rang and the caretaker's name appeared, his stomach tightened. His grandmother rarely called this late. "She's fine," the caretaker said quickly, sensing his alarm. "But something happened at the hospital today. She won't stop talking about it." Ren arrived at his grandmother's house within 20 minutes, his security trailing behind him like shadows. Haruko was sitting up in bed, her color better than he expected, her eyes brighter than he'd seen them in months. But there were tears on her cheeks. "Grandmother," he sat beside her, taking her hand. "What happened? Are you in pain?" "No, no." She shook her head, gripping his hand tighter. "Ren, listen to me. Today a young woman, a foreigner, a black woman, so kind, so beautiful in her spirit, she paid for my procedure. All of it. A stranger, Ren, she didn't know who I was. She didn't ask for anything." Ren's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you call me? I would have." "That's exactly why," Haruko snapped, some of her old fire returning. "I don't want to always call you. I don't want to be a burden, tied to my grandson's men following me everywhere. I wanted to be a normal old woman for one day, buying medicine, walking in the sun. And when I needed help, a stranger, Ren, gave everything she had without blinking." Her voice cracked. "I asked her name. She wouldn't tell me. She just told me to get well and walked away like it was nothing." Ren studied his grandmother's face. In 60 years, so much had tried to break her: the loss of her husband, the murder of her son, watching her grandson inherit a world of blood and secrecy. She rarely cried. She rarely asked him for anything. Tonight, she was gripping his hand like her life depended on it. "Find her," Haruko whispered. "Please, Ren, I need to thank her properly. I need to know she's all right. Find that young woman." Ren exhaled slowly. In his world, orders were absolute, and this was the first order his grandmother had given him in years. "I'll find her," he said. "I promise." By morning, Ren had mobilized resources most governments would envy. Hospital security footage, payment records, facial recognition sweeps across nearby CCTV networks. His lieutenants worked through the night, cross-referencing data. Running names. His right-hand man, Daichai, brought him the file by mid-morning, his expression skeptical. "Boss, we found her. Laura Johnson, American, works as an English teacher in Meguro." And I don't like it," Daichai said bluntly. "A random woman pays a stranger's hospital bill, no hesitation, no camera, no social media post about it. That's not generosity, boss. That's a setup. Somebody's testing us, trying to get close to the family." Ren said nothing, simply extended his hand for the file. He flipped through it slowly, bank statements showing a modest, steadily growing savings account, drained almost entirely the previous evening. Volunteer records at a children's shelter in Shinjuku, every Sunday for the past year, unpaid. A landlord's message thread showing she was 2 days late on rent, apologizing profusely, promising payment by the week's end. There was no scheme here, no manipulation. Just a woman who gave away nearly everything she had to a stranger and expected nothing back. "Keep watching her," Ren said quietly. "Quietly, I want to understand her before I approach her." For the next 4 days, Ren's men tracked Laura's movements, not to harm her, but to understand her. They watched her teach English to giggling children with more patience than the job paid for. They watched her eat convenience store rice balls alone because she couldn't afford much else that week. They watched her sketch designs late into the night in a small, cluttered apartment, dreaming of a business that felt impossibly far away. Every report that came back to Ren painted the same picture: a woman who worked hard, gave generously, and asked for nothing. Something shifted in him, something he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to meet her, not as the boss of Tokyo's most feared organization, but as himself. Comment down below what you think Ren's next move should be, because trust me, this story is about to take a turn nobody sees coming. Ren arranged the meeting carefully. He learned Laura frequented a small cafe near her apartment every Saturday morning, sketchbook in hand, coffee cooling beside her while she designed dresses she couldn't yet afford to make. He walked in wearing a plain sweater and jeans, nothing like the tailored suits that defined his public persona, and sat 2 tables from her, watching for a moment before approaching. "Excuse me," he said, his English polished from years of international business dealings. "Is this seat taken?" Laura glanced up, surprised, then smiled politely and shook her head. "No, go ahead." He sat, ordered a coffee, and let a comfortable silence pass before speaking again. "You're the woman who helped the elderly lady at Meguro Hospital last week." Laura's eyebrows rose. "How do you know about that?" "My grandmother told me," Wren said simply. "I'm here on her behalf. She wanted to thank you." Laura's expression softened immediately, all suspicion melting into warmth. "Oh, is she all right? I've thought about her every day." "She's recovering well, because of you." Wren studied her face, the genuine relief in her eyes, no calculation, no expectation of reward. "You didn't have to do what you did." Laura shrugged, stirring her coffee. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Wren said, his voice quiet but certain. "They wouldn't." Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, maybe, of two people who understood the weight of walking through a world that rarely rewarded kindness, yet chose kindness anyway. "My grandmother would like to meet you properly," Wren continued. "To thank you herself, would you allow that?" Laura hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that." If you're enjoying the tension building here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Because what happens between Wren and Laura next will completely change both their lives. Over the following weeks, Wren found himself inventing reasons to see Laura again. A coffee to discuss her visit with his grandmother turned into long conversations about her fashion dreams. He offered gentle business advice, careful never to reveal the true scale of his own empire, framing himself simply as a businessman who'd built companies from nothing. They walked through Yogi Park during cherry blossom season, petals drifting around them like slow-falling snow. Laura taught him English slang with theatrical enthusiasm, laughing when he mispronounced "chill out" as though it physically pained him. "You're impossible," she teased, nudging his shoulder. "I'm disciplined," Wren corrected, the corner of his mouth lifting in the smallest smile, a smile few people in Tokyo had ever seen on his face. "Disciplined people don't say chill out like they're issuing a corporate memo," she shot back, and he laughed, a real laugh, unguarded, the kind he hadn't allowed himself in years. Laura had no idea that the calm, thoughtful man walking beside her commanded absolute loyalty from thousands, that his name alone caused rival organizations to reconsider their plans, that beneath his gentle demeanor lived a man capable of terrifying decisiveness. To her, he was simply Wren, attentive, intelligent, surprisingly funny once he let his guard down, and unlike anyone she'd ever met. Weeks turned into months. Feelings deepened, quiet and steady, the kind that build not from grand gestures but from 1,000 small moments. Him remembering exactly how she took her coffee, her saving him a seat at every gathering, both of them finding reasons to extend goodbyes a little longer each time. Haruko watched it all unfold with quiet delight, telling her caretaker more than once, "That girl has no idea what she's walked into, but I've never seen my grandson this alive." Then, one evening, everything changed. Laura had gone to meet Wren at what she believed was simply one of his company buildings, running slightly late after a lesson ran long. She walked through a side entrance she'd never used before, following a hallway that led toward voices, low, urgent Japanese, followed by the unmistakable sound of men speaking with deep, practiced deference. She turned a corner and froze. A dozen men in dark suits stood in perfect rows, heads bowed low before Wren, who stood at the center of the room with an authority Laura had never witnessed from him before, controlled, absolute, terrifying in its calm. "Understood, boss," one man said, and the others echoed it in unison, still bowed. "Boss." Laura's blood ran cold. She backed away slowly, but not quietly enough. Wren's eyes lifted and found hers across the room, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something close to panic flicker across his composed features. "Laura," he started, stepping forward. She was already running. This is the moment everything changes, and if you don't want to miss what happens next, make sure you're subscribed, because this story is about to get intense. Laura didn't answer his calls for 3 days. She sat in her small apartment, staring at her phone, replaying every gentle moment they'd shared, wondering how much of it had been real, wondering if she'd been a fool, wondering how a man so tender could command a room of dangerous men with a single word. On the 4th day, Ren appeared at her door. Drenched from rain he hadn't bothered to shield himself from, his usual composure completely gone. "Please," he said, "5 minutes, that's all I ask." Laura crossed her arms, her voice trembling with hurt and anger. "Was any of it real? The park, the coffee, though was I just some game to you?" "None of it was a game," Ren said firmly. "Every moment was real. I should have told you the truth sooner, and I'm sorry I didn't, but I need you to understand something about my life." She let him in, reluctantly, and he told her everything. How his father had been murdered when Ren was only 22, thrusting leadership of the organization onto him before he was ready. How he'd inherited a legacy built on violence and had spent a decade quietly, ruthlessly reshaping it from within. "I banned human trafficking the first year I took control," he said. "Drug distribution through my territories gone within 3 years. Child exploitation, anyone caught even suggesting it answers to me personally, and I promise you, they never suggest it twice." "Then what do you even do?" Laura asked, still guarded. "We protect neighborhoods from the organizations that don't share those values," Ren said. "We control territory so worse men can't. It's not clean. It's not something I'm proud to hand down to children someday. But it's not what you think it is, either." Laura studied him for a long moment, searching for any trace of deception, and found none. "Why didn't you just tell me from the start?" "Because for the first time in my life," Ren said quietly, "I wanted someone to know me before they knew what I command. I wanted to be Ren before I was ever the boss." Tears filled Laura's eyes, but she said nothing, torn between fear and the undeniable truth that everything about him, the man she'd fallen for, had been genuine. "I need time," she finally said. Ren nodded, standing to leave. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." But time was a luxury. Neither of them would keep for long. Word had spread through Tokyo's underworld about Ren's growing attachment to an outsider, and rival syndicate leader Kenji Ishida saw opportunity in vulnerability. Ishida had spent years chafing under the informal boundaries Ren's organization enforced, resentful of the territories he couldn't touch, the trafficking routes permanently closed to him. If he could strike at something Ren cared about, he could force concessions no negotiation ever would. 3 nights later, as Laura left her apartment for a late tutoring session, a black van pulled alongside her. Before she could scream, gloved hands seized her, a cloth pressed against her mouth, and the world went dark. She woke bound to a chair in a dim warehouse, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Scream all you want," a voice said from the shadows, Ishida himself, cold amusement lacing his tone. "Nobody's coming for a foreign schoolteacher." But he was wrong. If your heart is racing right now, comment below and let me know, because what Ren does next will show you exactly why they call him the most feared man in Tokyo. Ren received the call at 2 a.m. Daichai's voice was uncharacteristically shaken. "Boss, they took her. Ishida's men. They're claiming responsibility, demanding we open 3 territories in exchange for her release." Something in Ren went terrifyingly, absolutely still. "Mobilize everyone," he said, his voice a low, controlled storm. "Every man, every resource. I want her location within the hour, and I want Ishida's entire operation to understand precisely what happens when they touch what's mine." What followed was the most brutal, coordinated operation Ren's organization had executed in years. Within 40 minutes, his men had identified 3 possible warehouse locations tied to Ishida's shipping fronts. Ren personally led the assault on the correct one, moving through the building with lethal precision, his usual calm replaced by something colder, sharper, unstoppable. Laura heard the commotion before she understood what was happening. Shouting, gunfire, the sound of a door being torn from its hinges. Then Ren was there, kneeling before her, cutting her restraints with shaking hands, his composed mask completely shattered. "I'm here," he said, his voice breaking with relief as he pulled her into his arms. "I'm here. You're safe. I promise you you're safe." Laura clung to him, sobbing, all her fear and doubt collapsing into pure relief. "You came." "I will always come," Ren said fiercely. "Always." Within days, word spread across every syndicate in Tokyo about what happened to Ishida's operation, and about the declaration Ren made publicly, standing before assembled leaders from every organization, Laura safely beside him. "The woman beside me is under my protection," he said, his voice carrying absolute, unquestionable authority. "Anyone who harms her, anyone who threatens her, answers to me personally. This is not a warning. This is the last time I will say it." No one doubted him. No one dared test him again. In the months that followed, something remarkable happened. Ren, having spent a decade transforming his organization from within, finally made the decision he'd quietly dreamed of for years. He began the careful, deliberate process of stepping down, transferring leadership to men he'd trained personally to preserve everything he'd built while finally freeing himself from the life he'd never chosen. Laura stood beside him through every difficult negotiation, every uncertain moment, never once wavering, understanding now the full weight of what he carried and choosing, fully and completely, to carry it beside him. On a soft spring evening beneath blooming cherry blossoms in the same park where they'd first laughed together, Ren knelt before her, his composed exterior giving way completely to raw, unguarded emotion. "I never chose this life," he said, holding a small velvet box. "But I choose you. I will always choose you." Laura, tears streaming freely down her face, said the only word that mattered. "Yes." A year later, they opened the Haruko Foundation together, named for the grandmother whose fragile courage had brought them together. A cultural center supporting immigrants and underprivileged children throughout Tokyo, offering the same unconditional kindness that had started their story in the first place. Haruko, watching them cut the ribbon together, wiped tears from her eyes and turned to her caretaker. "That girl saved more than my life that day," she whispered. "She saved my grandson's soul." If this story moved you, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one, and let us know in the comments which moment hit you the hardest. Thank you for watching till the end, and we'll see you in the next story.